Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from anywhere you are watching from. My distinguished colleagues, participants, and organizers of this very important 2025 iPRES conference. Now, I am honored to present this study on behalf of myself and my co-authors, Folasade Adepoju and Kemboi Gladys. I'm a digital librarian from the National Library of Nigeria. Our presentation is titled The Tūhono Africa Partnering to Preserve Quality Indigenous Knowledge Practices for the Past, Present, and Future Generations. Now, this study stems from a shared concern for how Africa indigenous knowledge, especially that of Dr. Ladi Kwali in Nigeria. She's a Nigerian most celebrated potter, even up to date, is being lost due to inadequate preservation practices. Now, at this conference, we want to connect this story to the global theme of Tūhono, which also means to connect the Maori, showing how partnership can bridge the traditional wisdom with modern digital preservation framework. Today, on behalf of myself, Folasade and Gladys, I will take you through the journey, from the problem of neglect to the promise of digital revitalization. Now, but before I commence, I would like to, give a quick overview of what our study is all about. Our paper examined the declining condition of both the physical artifacts and the digital record of Dr. Ladi Kwali, a legendary Nigerian potter, whose arts match traditional Gwari pottery with the modern design. Through our study, fieldwork, and interviews, we found that many of our works and tools are either unpreserved, undocumented, or deteriorating. Even institutions holding our legacy, like the Cyprian Ekwensi Cultural Center in Abuja and the Ladi Kwali Centers in Kwali and Suleja, lack proper cataloging, metadata, and digitization strategies. Now, to respond, we introduce the Digital Preservation Coalition Rapid Assessment Model, which is popularly known as the DPC RAM. It is a framework that enables communities to build sustainable digital preservation capacity. The essence of this study is not just about saving pots, it's about preserving stories, identity, and the continuity of indigenous knowledge system for many generations to come. So let's begin with the context. Across Africa, indigenous knowledge, whether in arts, music, or medicine, has shaped global creativity and cultural identity. And Dr. Ladi Kwali stands out as an example of how traditional Gwari pottery grew into a globally celebrated art form. Our work symbolizes both artistic mastery and cultural resilience. However, today, the museum and centers that hold our legacy are in decline. We found poor infrastructure. There is no metadata and minimal digital preservation efforts. And without metadata or cataloging, these artifacts lose their stories. And also, with them, part of Africa's historical narrative. This study therefore called for a convergence between the digital technologies, the indigenous knowledge holders, and cultural policy to ensure that Africa past is not forgotten, but actively sustained in the digital future. Now, to appreciate this urgency, the urgency of this work, it is very important to understand who Ladi Kwali is. She was born in 1925 in Kwali town, now within the Nigeria's Federal Capital Territory. She learned pottery through observation and mentorship. It is a classic method of indigenous knowledge transmission. And in 1954, there's a British potter called Michael Cardew. He recognized her extraordinary talent and invited her to join the Abuja Pottery Center, where she mastered new methods such as wheel throwing and glaze chemistry. We saw some of this equipment also when we visited a workshop at site. Now, Kwali's creativity also produced a hybrid art form, where indigenous Gwari pottery met Western techniques, giving birth to works that captivated audiences globally. And between 1958 and 1972, our exhibition across Europe, America, also transformed her into an ambassador of African artistry. But the paradox is that while our name is etched in history, the physical legacy of our work back home in Nigeria and in Africa is deteriorating rapidly. This is a tragic gap between global recognition and local preservation of many of our cultural heritage. So the problem, what do we found in our study is a very concerning one. Many of Kwali's original artifacts located in the centers, the three centers we visited at Kwali and Abuja and Suleja, they have been neglected. They are uncatalogued and stored in unsafe conditions. Some of our iconic tools and pots lie exposed to dust, heat, and moisture without documentation or digital record. This is not merely about the physical decay of clay, it is about the erosion of a nation's memory. The absence of metadata and provenance has created an interpretive vacuum, one that threatens to erase the story of how quality indigenous knowledge breach culture. The problem is a systemic one. The poor funding, the lack of policies, and no preservation continuity between generations. We therefore argue that this situation demands a structured, locally relevant model like the DPC RAM, a framework that can guide institutions to rebuild their preservation capacity incrementally and, of course, sustainably. And to ground our analysis in live reality, we adopted the qualitative research approach. And between October 2024 and March 2025, we visited Abuja, Kwali, and Suleja, the three main sites that hold traces of Kwali artistic journey in Nigeria. Our participants included traditional rulers, family members of Ladi Kwali, some of our apprentices, our former colleagues, people who had personal or professional connections with her while she was alive. We also spoke with curators and cultural workers at the Cyprian and Community Cultural Centers in Abuja, as well as the Ladi Kwali training centers. And through purposive sampling, we ensure that only those with direct engagement with Ladi Kwali legacy were interviewed. We also conducted site inspections. We observed the state of our tools, our workspaces, and the condition of preserved artifacts to validate some of our interviewees' opinions. And this approach has helped us to bridge you know, narrative memory with tangible evidences, painting a holistic picture of both the heritage value and the preservation crisis. And then what do we find out? When we visited the Ladi Kwali centers in Kwali and Suleja, what we found was, heartbreaking. It's very, very heartbreaking. The once vibrant hub for creativity now stand as symbols of neglect by the governments, the private organizations, international organizations, cultural institutions, what have you, with different combine. You can see from this picture, you can see these are sites, these are places. This is a place where Ladi Kwali produces some of our artistic pottery. There are so many combine and rusted equipment and broken things all around. And the three Kwali's original pottery pieces that were found, and even those that were exposed, undocumented, and physically deteriorating, are traditional coil and pinch tools, the very instrument that birthed a masterpiece, life forgotten and unpreserved somehow. There was a former assistant director that told us bluntly that situation resulted from decades of poor funding and governmental indifference. Attempts to renovate the centers have also failed repeatedly. What we see now is not just physical decay, it is the erosion of a cultural ecosystem that once trained artisans, great artisans, and inspired many generations. This site should be living museum, yet they are failing relics of lost potentials. And another finding, which is our second finding, you know, is in Cyprian Equity Cultural Center in Abuja, which holds 15 of Kwali's remaining work. These artifacts, though precious, very beautiful to see, they are not cataloged, not digitized, and they lack even the basic metadata. And without metadata, context is lost. Meaning no one can truly understand who made what, when, and then why. There are no proper environmental controls, also no humidity regulation and no preservation plan in place. And as a result, we observe visible signs of deterioration, cracks, on some parts, like you can see here, fading glaze and physical instability. This neglect is symptomatic of a larger crisis in cultural heritage management in Nigeria and by large in Africa, and where these institutions operate with limited resources, outdated systems, and insufficient funds and technical infrastructures. And in essence, Ladi Kwali's work, which inspired the world, is more accessible to international audiences through foreign museums than to Nigerians themselves. This imbalance raises urgent questions about ownership, access, and cultural injustice. And also, the most alarming finding is the complete absence of succession planning. This is no coordinated, there is no coordinated national program by either the government or cultural agencies or partnership to document, digitize, or teach Kwali's technical knowledge and techniques systematically. And then as older custodians and porters pass away, their knowledge dies with them, leaving a widening gap in intergenerational transmission. And ironically, while Nigerians institutions struggle, Western museums such as the Smithsonian and the Fitzwilliam have already digitized some of our works, meaning our legacy is more digitally secure abroad than our country home. This imbalance also undermines digital inequality that continues to define the post-colonial heritage management. We propose that the Digital Preservation Coalition Rapid Assessment Model, which is also known as um, the DPC RAM, should be localized and applied within the Nigerian and African context so as to help institutions assess their readiness, set achievable milestones, goals, and also develop sustainable community-led preservation ecosystem. And through this, we can, of course, ensure that the legacy of Ladi Kwali and many other um, great people like her, is protected, shared, and owned by the communities who bettered it. And also, one of the most inspiring aspects of our study was the rediscovering how Wali nurtured others. She was not just an artist, as we have been saying, she was a teacher, a mentor, and an advocate for women in poetry. As the first woman to train at the Abuja Poetry Center, she broke gender barriers, taught apprentices, and laid the foundation for what would later become Nigeria's organized ceramic sectors. Some of our proteges established associations such as the Ceramic Research Association of Nigeria, we call it this CRAN. We also have the Craft Potters Association of Nigeria, the CIPAN, and the Oikenan Ceramic Foundation. And unfortunately, this group now work in isolation, lacking a coordinated national preservation strategy. We envision a digital knowledge commons, a collaborative platform co-developed with these associations, where oral histories, videos of traditional methods and designs archives can live together forever. And this would also transform Kwali's story from a fading memory into a living digital legacy that connects artisans, educators, and policymakers across Africa, Nigeria, and of course the diaspora. And the implications beyond the physical preservation, our study also explored the transformative potentials of digital preservation. Ladi Kwali's work is more than clay and glaze. It is a repository of cultural intelligence, gender empowerment, and indigenous design philosophy. Her influence sparked the creation of foundations like the Oinkinan Ceramic Foundation, which focuses on training and empowering young girls who now form more than half of Nigerians, who now form more than half of Nigerian ceramic workforce. The digital preservation can amplify this impact by documenting processes, recording oral knowledges, and creating an immersive learning environment through digital tools. And also imagine a virtual Kwali studio, where young potters across Africa can learn directly from digitized 3D models of our works and listen to oral recordings from our apprentices. This also aligns with the UNESCO framework for safeguarding intangible cultural heritage, ensuring that indigenous practices are not only preserved but actively practiced in digital spaces. So in essence, digital preservation becomes an act of cultural continuity. And now let's talk about the impacts, because preservation is not only cultural, it is also economic. Before Kwali poetry in Nigeria was seen, largely as it was seen as a largely as old crafts. Our work through artistry, international exhibitions, and mentorship redefined poetry as both an art and an enterprise. She created jobs, trained artisans, and demonstrate that indigenous knowledge can generate sustainable livelihood. By showcasing her art across Europe and America, she opened global markets for African ceramics, making indigenous art both respected and also profitable. Today, digital preservation offers a way to expand this impact further by promoting cultural tourism, supporting creative startups, and connecting artisans to global buyers. In short, preserving Kwali's legacy is not only an act of remembrance, it is a strategic investment in Africa's creative economy and digital future. And in response to this urgent preservation crisis, our study proposes the DPC RAM as a practical roadmap. Now, the DPC RAM is not a one-size-fits-all framework. It is a flexible tool that allows institutions to measure their preservation maturity, identify weaknesses, and also improve step by step. The first capability, which is the community, is at the heart of the model. Yes, it emphasizes that the people who create and interpret heritage, the potters, the elders, the creators, must be co-owners of the preservation process. Then also we have the organizational viability. This ensures institutions integrate digital preservation into their core mission rather than treating it as an external project. And then policy and strategy also emphasize cultural sensitivity. Our policies must reflect local values and storytelling traditions, not just Western technical standard. And the legal framework also must protect indigenous ownership and consent, especially as digital materials can be easily misused or cooperated. Then IT capability must be built around the local realities using open source tools, offline storage, and mobile digitization methods. And finally, the continuous improvement. This is to recognize that digital preservation is a living and developing process. And in short, the DPC RAM, give us a sustainable, community-driven pathway to build heritage from vulnerability to viability. As we implement the digital preservation, it's essential to view it not as a project, but as a living ecosystem. Continuous improvement lies at the center of sustainability, and through the periodic DPC RAM assessment, the institution can measure their progress, learn from experience, and also evolve and develop. And this DPC RAM model allows for learning loops where feedback from staff and communities help to redefine and refine the practices. It also keeps preservation relevant by embracing new technologies such as the mobile scanning, the 3D modeling, the AI system metadata generation, all these adapted into African context. And looking forward, we envision the creation of a Pan-African indigenous knowledge digital repository that connects communities across borders. And then collaboration with international partners, libraries, archives, museums, and other research institutes can further enhance um, um, exchange and visibility. And then finally, integrating digital preservation into higher education, especially in library and heritage management programs, ensure that the next generation is prepared to carry this mission forward. And in essence, digital preservation should become part of the cultural DNA of every institution, country, and community. And then as we close this presentation, I want on behalf of my co-author, Folasade and Gladys, and myself, invite you to reflect on what the story of Ladi Kwali teaches us. Our artistry represents the fusion of indigenous wisdom and creative innovation. Yet, our legacy faces the threat of silence, not because our story is forgotten, but because it remains undigitized, undocumented, and unprotected. Our study highlights that the solution lies in structured framework like the DPC RAM, which enable communities to build capacity gradually, grounded in their own cultural realities. And our call to action is very clear. Let us restore Africa's right to tell and digitally transmit its own stories. Let us build bridges between institutions across countries and with the global preservation community, just as the DPC and the iPRES. And above all, let us invest in the people, the artisans, the elderly people, the librarians, the archivists, the curators, and the cultural custodians who will carry this mission forward. And by doing so, we ensure that Ladi Kwali's hands, though no longer shaping clay, will continue to shape the digital future of heritage. So thank you so much for your attention and participation in this international dialogue on digital preservation. So on behalf of myself, Adepoju Folasade, Kemboi Gladys, we say very big thank you. Do enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.